The Dutch have stared down an impossible foe for centuries, the North Sea. Floods were a constant threat, swallowing homes, lives, and entire towns. However, the Dutch refused to surrender and became a global leader in flood defense. So how did they do it? Let's get into the mystery behind all this and see how they've literally clawed back territory from the sea. So stick around to find out the secrets these modern-day Davids hold against this watery Goliath. The Netherlands, a land famously known for windmills, tulips, and clogs, also carries a less charming title: lowlands. And that's precisely what defines its battle with water. Over 50% of the country, including major cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, lies below sea level. This inherent vulnerability and a changing climate make flooding a constant threat, a part of Dutch life for centuries. However, the Dutch found amazing ways to survive in such areas and found solutions for adapting to future uncertainties. Now, the Netherlands' problem with flooding goes way back. Around 10,000 years ago, as the Ice Age ended, melting ice caused sea levels to rise. It made the North Sea and a huge lake in the Netherlands. This lake, known as Lacus Flevo back in Roman times and later called Almere during the Middle Ages, kept causing devastating floods every few decades, taking many lives. The Dutch have always been smart about managing water. They started reclaiming land as early as the 14th century, but the really cool stuff happened in the 1600s during the Dutch Golden Age. Back then, they drained a big lake called the Beemster using windmills and turned it into farmland, making many people happy and wealthy. However, despite their progress, some areas along the Zuider Sea still faced floods and hardships. As early as 1667, they had plans to shut down that sea by building dams, but the technology just wasn't ready for such a huge project. Fast forward to the mid-1800s. After draining some lakes around Amsterdam, there was a push to reclaim the Zuider Sea. Plans were drawn up to build dikes and pump out the water using steam engines. So why was it rejected? There was progress, but concerns about money led to the plan getting scrapped in 1877. Around 1891, a guy named Cornelis Lely had a new plan. He wanted to close the Zuider Sea with a dam and make smaller dikes in the new lake. Lely focused on land that could be used for farming. But this plan faced its own problems, debates over costs and how it would affect coastal communities. Still, Lely managed to sell it to the people by talking about lower maintenance costs for all those dikes. But it took a big flood in 1918 and World War I's challenges for the Dutch to decide to go ahead with Lely's plan finally. They started building the Afsluitdijk, a 30-kilometer dam to close off the Zuider Sea. This massive project kicked off in 1920 and took over 10 years to finish. At the same time, they ran some tests on smaller areas to see if salty soil could be used for farming. Then came the task of reclaiming the larger Wieringermeer. They built dikes and pumped out the water, revealing salty, barren soil. They had to figure out which crops could handle it. Rye, barley, and grass clover did the trick. But it wasn't easy. During the 1930s economic crisis, thousands of unemployed people worked hard, digging ditches by hand to manage excess water. The Dutch took a significant step in 1992 by setting up a national flood policy, marking a pivotal shift in how they tackled flooding. This policy not only safeguarded the Dutch from floods, but also set incredibly high national standards for flood safety. It even became a part of their constitution, emphasizing the right of their population to protection from floods. Their approach to flood protection was pretty stringent. For the densely populated western areas, they planned to protect against 10,000-year floods, which have just a 0.01% chance of occurring each year. In less populated regions, the protection was geared towards 4,000-year floods. Comparatively, the U.S. often uses a 100-year flood standard for safety and insurance policies, which is way lower than the Dutch standard. The Dutch didn't just stick to building walls and dikes to fight floods. They adopted a broader, more future-focused approach. One of their standout projects was Room for the River, kicking off in 2006 with a whopping $3 billion budget. This massive initiative involved about 40 different projects along Dutch rivers and waterways. Instead of just trying to keep water at bay, they allocated space to handle flooding safely, focusing on expanding flood channels and plains while removing barriers like dikes. They had some pretty impressive projects in play, not one or two, but hundreds. Take the Houtribdik, a 30-kilometer-long dam built as part of a project from the 1920s to reclaim land from the shallow Zuider Sea inlet. In places like Noordward near Rotterdam, they transformed large polders into floodwater reservoirs. Similarly, in the ancient town of Nijmegen, they moved a dike and created a new channel for the river the Waal to tackle floods. Not just that, the flood control program in Nijmegen sparked broader urban renewal, with an urban park and riverfront promenade becoming part of the landscape. But all these grand projects come with a hefty price tag and some silent challenges. The Nijmegen project alone cost $500 million. Sacrifices were made, like displacing people from flood-prone zones and repurposing land. Yet this trade-off brought back natural floodplains that act as sponges during floods and offer recreational spaces when dry. Let's talk about something incredible: the Zandmotor, or sand engine. It's a massive 1-kilometer-long sand peninsula along South Holland's coast, built back in 2011. Now, what's so cool about it? It cleverly uses natural forces to scatter around 21.5 million cubic meters of sand, preventing those annoying beach erosions. It's like nature lending a hand in keeping the shores intact. This concept, known as sandscaping, is not only smarter, but also cheaper than the traditional methods. Their expertise has led to a thriving $5.5 billion water management industry, attracting global attention. From Delhi to Sao Paulo, cities worldwide seek Dutch water management expertise. After Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans partnered with Dutch designers in the United States to develop a resilience strategy called the Gentilly Resilience District. When Hurricane Sandy hit the U.S. in 2012, guess who everyone turned to? Yes, the Dutch. They inspired the Big U project in New York. This bold plan aimed at shielding Manhattan from those pesky storm surges. Moreover, they didn't just react after disasters struck, but invested upfront in flood control infrastructure. You know, the stuff that helps prevent catastrophes, rather than just cleaning up after them. And guess what? It turned out to be more cost-effective. The Netherlands' success story isn't just about its engineering expertise, mindset, and culture. Their legal and political system revolves around dealing with water issues, which they've been doing for centuries. It's a different story in the US, where systems aren't exactly designed with that in mind. So, what can we learn from the Dutch? Well, they've shown us the importance of proactively dealing with flooding. And you know what? The Dutch influence on projects like the Gentilly Resilience District or Governor's Island Revamp could be a step in the right direction for us. The Dutch have taught us a lot about overcoming flood problems. It's not just about engineering, it's about changing our approach and mindset and adapting to the challenges ahead in the best possible way.